She's a waitress, that's what they saw. A woman behind a counter. Apron. Coffee pot. Smile that remembers how to take your eggs. That's exactly what she wanted them to see. What they didn't see: the recording device inside the sugar canister. 3 months of conversations. Every threat. Every word Ray Donato believed no one would ever hear. What they didn't know: her father hadn't died of kidney failure. He'd been methodically poisoned over 8 months because he kept records, because he wrote things down, because an honest man in a dishonest town is the most dangerous thing in the world. What they never considered: the woman pouring their coffee had spent 14 months building something they couldn't buy, threaten, or take apart. The day their enforcer put his hand on her shoulder, 4 seconds, 1 elbow, 1 wrist lock. They thought they were walking into a diner. They walked into the end of everything they'd built. She knew it. She'd been waiting. The lunch rush was over. That was always Wren's favorite part of the day. Not the morning chaos, not the dinner crowd, that quiet stretch between 2 and 4, when the last customer had paid their check, when the coffee was fresh, when the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional tick of the ceiling fan overhead. Calloway's Diner, 35 years, on the corner of Main and Birch, Sadler Creek, Tennessee. The walls were the color of old honey. The booths were dark red vinyl, cracked at the corners from years of people sitting down and standing up and sitting down again. The counter had 11 stools. Her father always said 11 was the right number. Not 10, not 12. 11, she never asked him why. She wished she had. Wren Calloway was 34 years old, and she had been working in this diner since she was 9. First washing dishes, then buzzing tables, then taking orders when the weekend girl called in sick and her father said, "You know the menu better than she does anyway." She did. She still did. She was running a cloth along the counter now, slow and even, the way her father had taught her. "Don't rush the counter, Wren. The counter's not going anywhere." The photo above the register caught her eye the way it always did. Thomas Calloway, father, standing in front of this very counter on the day he opened, March 14, 1989. He was 31 years old in that photo. White apron, big hands, the kind of smile that didn't know it was being photographed. He had been gone 14 months. She still talked to him sometimes, not out loud. Just in her head. "Dad, we got the freezer fixed. Dad, the Henderson account finally paid. Dad, I think we're in trouble." She was on that last one a lot lately. The bell above the door rang. 3 men walked in. Wren knew immediately they weren't there to eat. You learn to read a room when you've been in the service industry long enough. You learn the difference between a man who's hungry and a man who's there for something else. It's in the way they move, the way they don't look at the menu, the way their eyes go to you first, not to the specials board. These 3 were definitely not there for the specials. The one in front was broad across the shoulders. Late 40s, maybe 50. Short hair, no expression. Wore a jacket that was too heavy for July in Tennessee. The kind of jacket you wear when you're carrying something underneath it. His name was Marco. She didn't know that yet. She'd find out later. The other 2 fanned out slightly as they came in. Not obvious, but deliberate. The way you fan out when someone has taught you to fan out. Mr. Donato wants an answer today. That's what they were here for. Marco stopped at the counter. He looked at her the way some men look at waitresses, like she was furniture that happened to be standing up. "Mrs. Calloway." His voice was flat, professional. The tone of a man who had delivered unpleasant messages many times and had stopped finding it interesting. "Mr. Donato wanted me to check in, see if you'd had a chance to reconsider his offer." Wren kept the cloth moving. "Tell Mr. Donato I appreciate him thinking of us," she said. "The answer is still no." Marco smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. He thought you might say that. He stepped closer, and then he made a mistake. He put his hand on her shoulder. Not hard. Not aggressive, technically. Just a hand on her shoulder from behind, the way men do when they want to remind you that they're bigger than you. When they want you to feel the weight of it. She felt it, and then she moved. It happened in about 4 seconds. She spun left, away from the hand. Her right elbow came back and up. It caught Marco across the jaw, not her hardest shot, but enough. He went sideways into the counter, more surprised than hurt. Her left hand caught his right wrist on the way down, twisted it, and she used his own momentum to press his forearm against the countertop. Not breaking anything, just making a point. The second man stepped forward. Wren picked up the coffee pot with her free hand. Fresh pot. She set it on the counter directly in front of him, gently, almost politely. "I just made that," she said. "You're welcome to sit down." He stopped. The third man near the door hadn't moved at all. He was looking at her with an expression she'd seen before. The expression of a man recalculating. Marco straightened up. He worked his jaw. Looked at her. For a moment no one said anything. Then Marco picked up his jacket from where it had slid on the counter, adjusted it. Looked at her one more time. Mr. Donato will be in touch, he said. All three of them walked out. The bell above the door rang again. Ren stood there for a moment. Then she put the coffee pot back on the burner. Then she finished wiping down the counter. 3 weeks earlier. That's where this story actually starts. You have to understand what Sadler Creek is. It's not a famous place. It's not on the way to anything. You don't pass through Sadler Creek on your way somewhere else. You go there because you mean to. Population 6,000, give or take. Tucked into the eastern edge of Tennessee, where the land starts to rise and fold into the beginnings of the Appalachians. The hills are green in summer, gold in October, gray and honest the rest of the year. There's a hardware store that's been run by the same family since 1962. A barber shop where the conversation hasn't changed much since 1978. A volunteer fire department. A high school with a football team that breaks your heart every single year and you keep showing up anyway. And on the corner of Main and Birch, there's Callaway's Diner. It was Thomas Callaway who built it. With his own hands, largely. He poured the counter himself. He laid the black and white tile floor. He installed the 11 stools. He hung the menu board and wrote the specials in his careful, even handwriting every single morning for 35 years, right up until the morning he couldn't anymore. Thomas was a careful man, methodical. He'd been a bookkeeper before the diner. He had a bookkeeper's mind. Numbers meant something to him. Patterns meant something to him. When something didn't add up, it bothered him the way a splinter bothers your finger. You can't stop pressing on it. That quality, more than anything else, was what got him killed. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Ren had come back to Sadler Creek 6 years ago. She'd been in her 3rd year of medical school at Vanderbilt, doing well, actually. Not just passing, but genuinely understanding things, finding her footing. When her father called to say his doctor had found something, and it might be nothing, but he didn't want to go to appointments alone, she took a leave of absence. The leave became a year. The year became permanent, more or less. She never regretted it. She regretted that she'd had to make the choice, but not the choice itself. Her father needed her, the diner needed her. And somewhere along the way, she realized she loved this place in a way she hadn't understood when she was young and couldn't wait to leave. She met Boone Callaway the following year. His name was Boone Sheridan, then. The Callaway part came later. He came in on a Tuesday morning in April. He was 32 years old, sun-browned, with a jaw like it had been made from reclaimed material, and a scar along his left forearm that she would learn later came from the second of his 2 tours in Iraq. He sat at the counter, stool number 7, which would become his stool, and ordered black coffee and the biscuits and gravy. He left a good tip. He came back Thursday. He came back the following Tuesday. On the 3rd Tuesday, Thomas Callaway came out of the kitchen, looked at this man sitting at the counter reading the newspaper, and said to his daughter, "I like that one." Ren had said, "Dad." Thomas, "I'm just saying." He was right, as it turned out. They were married the following spring. Boone moved into the house on Sycamore that Ren had grown up in. He kept his garage on the edge of town, a one-man operation, oil changes and engine work, and the occasional restoration project that he loved the way some men love a crossword puzzle. He kept his Harley, an old road king that he'd rebuilt himself piece by piece. He was, in every way that mattered, a good man. He was also a man who paid attention. That would matter later too. Ray Donato had arrived in Sadler Creek 7 years ago. He came in the form of a company first, Donato Properties LLC. A sign on a vacant storefront. Then the storefront became a real estate office. Then the real estate office started buying things. First, it was the old mill building on the north end of town. Then the parking lot behind the pharmacy. Then a strip of rental properties on Cedar Street. All legitimate. All clean on paper. The kind of investment activity that any town with a vacancy problem would welcome. The people who sold to him were satisfied, mostly. The people who didn't want to sell found things getting complicated. It was subtle at first. A zoning question that needed clarification. A code violation that needed addressing. A supplier who was suddenly unavailable. A landlord whose terms suddenly changed. And then the offers came back, usually lower than before. Usually accepted. In 7 years, 6 of the 11 businesses on Main Street had changed hands. Every one of them was now a Donato Properties tenant. A coffee shop. A boutique clothing store that sold things nobody in Sadler Creek could afford. A wine bar that got maybe 8 customers on a good Friday night. The ones that sold told themselves they'd gotten a fair price. Some of them had. Some of them were still trying to convince themselves. Thomas Calloway had watched all of it. He tracked it the way he tracked everything, quietly, carefully, in a green composition notebook that he kept in the desk in the back office. Numbers, dates, names. He wasn't suspicious by nature. He was just precise. And what the numbers told him after 2 years of watching was that Donato Properties was not a real estate company. It was a machine for moving money. Clean money in, dirty money out. The construction contracts, the renovation projects, the property improvements. The paperwork was real, but the work wasn't. Or the work was real, but the invoices were doubled. Or the invoices were real, but the companies receiving them didn't exist. Thomas didn't know everything. He knew enough. He knew enough to write it down. He knew enough to be scared. And he knew enough that when his kidneys started failing, 18 months after he started that notebook, he lay in his hospital bed and looked at his daughter and couldn't find the words to tell her what he suspected. He almost told her. Twice, both times he looked at her face and thought, "Not yet. Let me get stronger. Let me be sure." He never got stronger. He died on a Tuesday in May. Quietly. The way he'd done most things, the notebook sat in a shoebox at the back of his office closet for 14 months, until Wren found it. She hadn't been looking for it. She'd been cleaning out the office. Something she'd been avoiding for over a year, because walking into that room still felt like pressing on a bruise. His handwriting was still on the supply order board. His reading glasses were still on the desk. The room still smelled like him, coffee and pencil shavings, and the particular cedar of the drawer liner. She was sorting through a box of old files when she found the shoebox. It was in the back of the bottom drawer, under a folder of tax documents from 2019. Unremarkable. Just a shoebox from a pair of work boots. Inside, a green composition notebook. His handwriting. She sat down on the floor right there, the way you sit down when your legs just stop cooperating. She read it. First section was straightforward. Property transactions. Purchase prices, dates, sellers. Information that was technically public record, just gathered in one place. That wasn't alarming in itself. The second section was different. He had cross-referenced the Donato Properties construction projects with county building permits. Renovation on the Cedar Street properties. Permitted cost, $180,000. Invoices in the county records, $340,000. Contract listed, Meridian Build Group, LLC. He paused on that. She got her laptop and looked up Meridian Build Group. The company had been registered in Delaware 4 years ago. One employee listed. A mailbox service in Chattanooga. No website, no review, no physical presence that she could find. She kept reading. Her father had found 3 contractors like that. 3 companies that appeared in Donato Properties invoices and nowhere else in the world. 3 names on paper. 3 conduits for money that went in one end and came out somewhere else. But it was the last page that stopped her completely. Her father's handwriting, toward the bottom, smaller than as usual. Like he'd written it quickly, or written it while trying to decide whether to write it at all. If I can't get this to someone who can use it, Wren, be careful. Dee knows I know. I may have said too much to the wrong person. I love you more than this diner and more than any of this. But someone needs to know. She sat on the floor of her father's office for a long time. Outside, the sun was going down. The light went gold, then orange, then gray. She thought about his death. The kidneys. The doctors who said they couldn't find a clear cause. The rapid deterioration that surprised everyone, including the physicians treating him. She had studied enough toxicology to know that arsenic poisoning, particularly at low, chronic doses, is one of the most effective methods of causing progressive kidney failure, and one of the least likely to be caught without specific testing. No one had ordered specific testing. No one had thought to. She sat there until it was fully dark. Then she got up. She put the notebook in her jacket pocket. She turned off the light. She walked out to the kitchen, where Boone was making dinner, moving around the stove with the unhurried competence of a man who'd learned to cook in a field kitchen. He looked up when she came in. He saw her face. He turned the burner off. He didn't say anything. He just waited. He'd always been good at that. She put the notebook on the kitchen table. She said, "I found something." He sat down. They read it together. Boone was quiet for a long time after. That was one of the things she had learned about him in 6 years of marriage. His silences were not empty, they were working silences. He went inside himself to think, the way other people pace or talk out loud. You learned not to interrupt them. Finally, he said, "Your dad ran a bookkeeping business before the diner." Yes, he would have known what he was looking at. Yes, and he wrote this. Boone tapped the last page lightly. The warning, the love. That's not a man who was confused. That's a man who knew he might be in danger. She didn't answer. Boone leaned back in his chair, looked at the ceiling. She watched him process. "We need to think about this carefully," he said. "Going to Pruitt." "I know," she said. "You've noticed the same thing I have." "The coffee cups," she said every morning. Every single morning. Sheriff Darrell Pruitt came in for his morning coffee. She'd always assumed he came to her diner because of loyalty, because of her father's friendship with him, because Calloway's was where half the town started their day. But 6 months ago, without comment or announcement, he'd stopped coming in. Now, whenever she drove past the sheriff's department, there was a paper cup on his desk. The Donato Plaza Cafe logo, their green and gold, a small thing. But Thomas Calloway had taught her. The small things were the ones that added up. "We can't go to him," she said. "No," Boone agreed. "We can't." They sat with that for a moment. "Nora Bassett," Wren said. Boone thought about it. "She knew your dad. She was the one who helped him set up the business structure when he bought the building. She knows property law. And she's got no connection to Donato that you know of, that I know of." Wren agreed. Boone was quiet again. Then, "There's something else I want to talk to you about." "But not tonight," she looked at him. "I need to check something first," he said. "Give me a few days." She wanted to push. She didn't. She trusted him. Ray Donato walked into Calloway's diner on a Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock. He walked in the way men like him always walk into rooms. Unhurried, like the room has been waiting for him. He was 66 years old, silver-haired, with the kind of tan you get from actual sunlight rather than a booth. He wore a gray suit that cost more than Wren's refrigerator unit. He had a lawyer with him, a compact man in his early 50s named Gerald Fitch, who carried a leather briefcase and had the careful, watchful eyes of someone who spent his life managing other people's problems. Donato looked around the diner, not the way a customer looks around. The way an appraiser does. He sat down at the best table, the corner booth by the window, the one with a view of both the street and the counter. He sat without being invited. He sat like a man who doesn't wait to be invited. "Mrs. Calloway." His voice was warm, unhurried, the voice of a man who has never needed to raise it. "I've heard a lot about this place. It's exactly what I imagined. What can I get you?" Wren asked. "Just coffee, thank you," a smile. "And a few minutes of your time." She brought the coffee. She stood at the table. Fitch opened the briefcase and took out a manila envelope. He set it on the table, pushed it slightly toward her. "Mrs. Calloway," Fitch said. "Donato Properties has been following S. Sadler Creek very closely for the past several years. This is a community with real character, real history. We'd like to be part of preserving that." "You've been buying most of it," Wren said. Fitch's expression didn't change. "Reinvesting," he said. "There's a distinction. We see potential here, and we see this location." He glanced around with practiced appreciation. As central to that potential, Wren didn't touch the envelope. "That's an offer," Donato said pleasantly. "A generous one, given current conditions. We'd like to develop this corner as part of a broader revitalization. You'd be part of something significant." Wren looked at him. She had a medical student's habit of reading faces, or the beginning of one. You learn to look past the expression to what's underneath it. What the muscles are doing that the person doesn't know they're doing. Donato's face was very controlled, but around the eyes, just around the eyes, there was a quality she recognized from emergency medicine. The quality of a man who's already made the decision, who is going through the motions of a conversation he knows the outcome of. She picked up the envelope, opened it. "Read the number." She did the math in about 3 seconds. "This is about 40% below market value," she said. "Current market conditions." "I know what current market conditions are," Wren said. "This isn't a market offer. This is a starting offer." Donato smiled again. This one was different from the first. Warmer almost. "I respect directness," he said. "Take some time. Look it over. Talk to your husband." He stood up, buttoned his jacket, left exact change for the coffee on the table, correct to the cent. She noticed. The tip of a man who knows exactly what he's doing with every dollar. At the door he paused. "Your father built something real here," he said. He said it gently, like he was offering a compliment. "I hope you'll let us help you honor that." He left. Fitch followed, briefcase in hand, not having looked at anything in the diner except Wren. She stood at the table. She picked up the change he'd left. Exact. Not a cent more. She put it in the register. That evening, she told Boone, he listened to the whole thing. Didn't interrupt. When she was done, he said, "What did you feel in the room with him?" That was such a Boone question. Not what did he say or what did he offer. What did you feel? Like the conversation was a formality, she said. Like he already knew what was going to happen next. "Because he does," Boone said. He's done this before, she said. 6 times on this street alone. She looked at him. You've been keeping track. I've been keeping track, he confirmed. He poured them both coffee. Set the cups down. Something careful in the way he moved, the way he did when he was deciding how much to say. I'm going to tell you something, he said, but I want you to hear the whole thing before you react. Okay, I've been looking into Donato. Not recently. Started about 8 months ago. She held the cup. After your dad died, she said. After your dad died, he agreed. I didn't say anything because I didn't have enough. I didn't want to put ideas in your head that I couldn't back up. Boone, I know. Let me finish. She let him finish. He told her what he'd been doing, the rides he'd taken that weren't just rides. Conversations in other towns. Greenville, Morristown, Johnson City. With men he'd met over the years through the garage, through the bike, through the loose network of people who move through small towns and remember what they see. Mechanics, long-haul drivers, men who'd done contract work and noticed when the paperwork didn't match the work. Boone had names. 3 shell companies, 2 locations used as document addresses, and 1 name that appeared repeatedly in connection with Donato's more sensitive arrangements. Victor Ames. She didn't know that name yet. He explained it carefully. Victor Ames was not a contractor. He was not a property manager. He appeared in no public record connected to Donato Properties. He appeared only in the recollections of a few careful men who had noticed him at the edges of things. What he did, specifically, depended on what needed doing. Wren sat with that. I think he had something to do with Dad, she said. I think it's possible. I don't know enough yet. Arsenic accumulates slowly, she said. Chronic low-dose exposure over 6-8 months. It would have started before Dad wrote those last pages. She paused. I should have thought to test. When he got sick. I should have. You watching your father die, Boone said. You don't get to blame yourself for not being a detective at the same time. She looked at her husband. He was watching her with the particular steadiness he had. The quality she had fallen in love with before she'd known it was happening. The quality of a man who has seen genuinely bad things and made peace with the fact that some things can't be undone. Only addressed. What do we do? She asked. We build a case, he said, carefully, quietly. We figure out who we can trust and who we can't. We don't move until we have something that holds up, and in the meantime, he said, you run the diner. You keep the door open. You act like nothing has changed. She thought about her father. His careful hands, his composition notebook, his habit of writing everything down because numbers meant something to him, because patterns meant something, because he'd believed right up until the end that if you documented the truth clearly enough, eventually the truth would do its work. He'd been right. He'd just run out of time. Okay, she said. Okay, Boone said. Certified letter arrived on a Tuesday. It was from the office of a civil attorney in Nashville. Not Fitch, but a firm Wren didn't recognize. The letterhead was expensive. The language was precise. Donato Properties LLC versus Callaway's Diner LLC, regarding a zoning compliance matter related to a variance granted in 2004 in connection with a building modification permit. She read it 3 times, the short version, a technical zoning variance that her father had filed 20 years ago, connection with a small expansion of the kitchen, had been classified incorrectly in the county records. It was a minor error on a document 2 decades old, completely correctable under normal circumstances, except that Donato Properties was petitioning the court to treat it as an ongoing violation, an unresolved material breach, grounds for a compliance review that could result in a mandatory usage restriction, pending remediation, which would mean she couldn't operate, which would mean she'd have no income, which would mean she couldn't maintain the mortgage on the property, which would mean she'd have to sell, 21 days to respond or the court would proceed without her. She sat with the letter at the counter. The lunch crowd was winding down. Deborah Winslow, her other waitress, was wiping down the far tables, humming something to herself. The ceiling fan turned slowly. 21 days, she thought about her father's face in that hospital bed. The things he'd almost said, the notebook in the box in the closet. She picked up her phone and called Nora Bassett. Nora Bassett had been practicing law in Sadler Creek for 40 years. She had retired 3 years ago, more or less, which meant she now only worked on things she found interesting. She had silver hair she kept short, a handshake like a carpenter, and a habit of looking at you directly that some people found unsettling. Wren had always found it reassuring. She met Wren at the diner after closing. Wren made coffee. Nora spread the letter on the counter and read it with the focused silence of someone who has spent 4 decades parsing documents for what they say and what they don't. This is Fitch's work, Nora said. How can you tell? The language here, she pointed to a specific clause, is a particular construction I've seen in documents originating from his office. It's technically correct, but it's structured to require a specific procedural response. If you respond wrong, you waive a defense you didn't know you had. He's counting on me not knowing, Ren said. He's counting on you either not knowing or not having counsel. Who knows? What do we do? Nora set the letter down, looked at her. The variance issue is addressable. Filing was technically misclassified, but there are correction procedures. It will take time, but it can be done. They're hoping I run out of time first. Yes, Nora said simply. They are. So we need more than just a procedural defense. You need to make their offense more costly than your defense. Nora folded her hands on the counter. Tell me about your father. Tell me everything you found, so Ren told her the notebook. The shell companies. The contractors who didn't exist. Final page with its careful, frightened handwriting. Her own calculations about arsenic and kidney failure and the tests no one had ordered. Nora listened without interrupting. When Ren finished, the kitchen was very quiet. Nora was looking at the counter. Working through something. I need to tell you something, Nora said. Something I haven't told anyone. Ren waited. 22 years ago, Nora said, I represented Ray Donato. Briefly, it was a civil matter that never went to trial. It was dismissed before we reached the discovery phase. At the time, I was told it was a standard resolution. I accepted that, but I kept the file, habit. And 3 years ago, when Donato properties started appearing in this town, I pulled it out. She paused. In the dismissal documents, there is a signature from the assistant district attorney's office at the time, authorizing a records transfer that had nothing to do with standard procedure. Signature? Nora looked at her directly. She said. The fan turned. The refrigerator hummed. He was in the DA's office then, Ren said. He was 30 years old and very ambitious, Nora said. And that signature, in context, means he handed over information about that investigation to someone outside proper channels. Enough to ensure the case collapsed. He protected Donato then, Ren said. And now he works for him. They are not friends, Nora said carefully. I don't believe they ever were. What I believe is that Fitch did something he shouldn't have done 22 years ago. And Donato knows about it, and that has been the nature of their arrangement ever since. He can't leave, Ren said. Even if he wanted to, that is my reading, Nora said. Which means he has more to protect than Donato does. Which means he is more dangerous in some ways. Cornered men make different decisions than powerful ones. Ren sat with that. Can you help me? She said. Nora looked at the letter on the counter, at the diner around them. At Ren, your father used to come to my office every December, she said, to review his year-end accounts. He was the most honest client I ever had. He was the kind of man who recalculated his own invoice if he thought I'd undercharged him. A pause. Yes, I'll help you. He told Boone about Nora when she got home. He listened at the kitchen table, the way he always did. Elbows on the table, hands loose, eyes on her face. Tracking not just the words, but the shape of them. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Fitch is the load-bearing wall, he said. That's what Northa thinks. If he goes, the whole structure changes. He turned his coffee cup in his hands. Your dad figured that out. Not all the way. But he got close enough that someone got scared. We have 21 days. He said, 21 days isn't forever, Boone said. But it's enough time to do this right. What does right look like? He was quiet again. The good kind of quiet. We need 3 things, he said finally. We need the legal defense. That's Nora. We need at least one person who'll testify to being pressured. That's not going to be easy, but Cole Hutchins might be someone. He lost his lumber yard and he's never made peace with it. And the third thing? Evidence that doesn't depend on anyone's memory. He looked at her. The kind they can't explain away in court. Nora has the file from 22 years ago. That's one piece, but it's old. We need something current, he paused. Donato's going to come back. He sent those men today and now he knows. He knows I can handle myself, she said. He knows more than that now, Boone said. He knows you're not going to fold. That changes his approach. He's going to come himself. He's going to try a different angle. Good, she said. He looked at her. Good? She got up, went to the kitchen drawer where they kept the hardware odds and ends. Batteries, rubber bands, the small tools that accumulate in any kitchen over years. She found what she was looking for in the back of the drawer. Small, barely bigger than a quarter. A voice-activated recording device she'd ordered online 3 months ago. Not entirely sure what she intended to do with it. She set it on the table. Boone looked at it. Looked at her. When he comes back, she said, I'll be ready. He picked it up, turned it over in his hands. Set it back down. Your father would have done the same thing, he said. He just would have used a composition notebook. Same principle, she said. Same principle, he agreed. Outside, the Tennessee night was warm and still. Somewhere down the street, a dog was barking at something and then stopping, satisfied. And then the quiet came back and Wren looked at the small device on the table. 21 days. She thought about what her father had written on that last page. Not the warning. She'd been thinking about the warning for weeks. But the other part, I love you more than this diner and more than any of this, that was the thing she kept coming back to. That was the thing she was seen for. Not the building. Not the property value. Not even the justice of it. Though that mattered. That mattered enormously. It was that her father had spent 35 years building something honest in a world that was increasingly skeptical of honest things. He'd poured his own counter. He'd laid his own floor. He'd opened his door every morning and made food for people, and remembered how they took their coffee and asked about their families and meant it. He had done all of that right. Someone had taken him from the world not because he was dangerous or powerful or even particularly in the way, but because he was honest, because he wrote things down, because he couldn't see something wrong and simply look away. That was the thing that burned in her chest when she let herself feel it. That was what she was not going to let go of. Boone, she said. Yeah, we're going to win this. He looked at her for a moment. His steady carpenter jaw, reclaimed material face. I know, he said. I just want us both in one piece when we do. Same thing, she said. She picked up the device and walked to the diner. She let herself in through the back. She stood in the dark kitchen for a moment, getting her bearings. The familiar smells. Coffee, grease, the particular cleanness of a commercial kitchen at the end of the day. She walked through to the dining room. The streetlight came in through the front windows. It fell across the counter. The 11 stools. The menu board with tomorrow's specials in her own handwriting now, not her father's. She looked at his photograph above the register. 31 years old, white apron, big hands. The smile that didn't know it was being photographed. I know, Dad, she thought. I'm paying attention. She found the sugar canister on the counter. Ceramic white heavy. It sat on the right side of the counter, the side closest to the window booth. The table Ray Donato had chosen without being invited, the table he would choose again. She unscrewed the lid. Set the device carefully inside, among the packets. Replaced the lid. Tested the placement, still stable, still functional, the small holes in the ceramic barely visible. She stepped back. Ray Donato would sit at that table. He would be comfortable. He would be confident. He would say things that he believed no one would ever hear outside that room. She'd make sure he was comfortable. That was what she did. She made people comfortable. She brought them coffee and remembered their orders and made them feel like the place was built for them. Her father had taught her that. He'd also taught her that the most important part of any record was making sure it couldn't be disputed later. She thought about what her father used to say about records, not just business records, any record of anything true. The world tries to make you doubt what you saw, he'd told her once. That's why you write it down. Not for the court, for yourself. So you can't be talked out of what you know. She had written it down in a sugar canister on a diner counter. In 3 backup locations. In every careful step she and Boone had taken for 3 weeks, the record existed. Now it would do its work. She had. She turned off the light. She locked the door behind her. She walked home through the warm Tennessee night. Tomorrow, Calloway's Diner would open at 7. The coffee would be made. The specials would be on the board. The door would be unlocked. And when Ray Donato came back, because he was coming back, she had no doubt about that. She would smile and bring him coffee and let him believe that he already knew how this was going to end. He didn't. Not yet. The garage had been searched. Wren found out at 7:15 in the morning, before the first customer came in. Boone had driven past Thomas Calloway's old accounting office, the small building on Hemlock Street that Wren still owned, still paid taxes on, hadn't yet decided what to do with. He called her from the parking lot. Someone's been in, he said. Back clean cut. Professional, she held the phone. The files, she said, gone through. Not ransacked. Searched. There's a difference. There was a difference. Ransacking was emotion. Searching was purpose. They didn't find anything, she said. It wasn't a question. There was nothing to find, Boone said. You moved the notebook 2 weeks ago. The copies are at Nora's, I know. I'm just telling you they moved. She stood behind the counter. The coffee was ready. The specials were on the board. Deborah was setting up the tables by the window, humming the way she did, moving with the comfortable economy of 9 years in the same diner. They know about the office, Wren said quietly. They knew about it before we did, Boone said. Your father, kept records there. They've probably been watching it since before he died, so they followed me. Or Boone said, someone told them you were there. She didn't answer. She watched Deborah straighten a salt shaker on table 4. Come in for breakfast, she said. We need to talk. The morning rush came and went. Wren worked through it the way she always did. Took orders, refilled coffee. Said good morning to Harold Birch, who came in every Monday and ordered the same thing he'd ordered every Monday for 12 years, and asked about his wife's garden the way she always did, and meant it the way she always meant it. This was the part of the work that people underestimated, the attention. Not just taking the order, but actually seeing the person in front of you. Actually caring even a little whether their day started well. Her father had understood that. He'd told her once that a diner wasn't really a restaurant. A restaurant is a transaction, he said. A diner is a relationship. People come back to a diner because it makes them feel like they belong somewhere. Your job isn't to feed them. Your job is to make sure they know someone sees them. She'd remembered that on the hard mornings. The mornings when her feet hurt before she started, and the coffee machine was acting up, and a table was complaining about something that wasn't her fault. She thought about it now, because it applied to more than just waitressing. It applied to paying attention, to noticing small things, to writing things down. Her father had done all of that, and someone had decided he knew too much. Boone came in at 9:30 after the rush thinned out. He sat at stool 7. She poured his coffee without being asked. He wrapped both hands around the cup. Tell me about the office, she said quietly. She was wiping down the counter, normal every day. Anyone watching would see a woman doing her job, same as I said. Back window, clean entry. They used a glass cutter, not a brake. Someone who's done it before. What were they looking for specifically? Hard to say. They went through the filing cabinet, the desk drawers, the boxes in the back. The notebook was gone before they got there. But they didn't know that, Boone said. Someone told them to look. Someone who knew the notebook might exist. She kept wiping the counter. Or someone who knew I'd been there, she said. He looked at her. Who knew you went to the office 2 weeks ago? She thought back. She'd gone on a Sunday afternoon, told no one in advance. Boone had been at the garage. She'd come home, shown him the notebook. The next day she'd come to work. She'd mentioned to Deborah, casually in passing, that she'd been going through her father's old office. She hadn't thought anything of it. Deborah, she said. He just waited. It might be nothing, Wren said. I might have mentioned it to someone else. I might have. She stopped. She went back through the week carefully. No. Deborah was the only one I told. I don't think Deborah is a bad person, Boone said. Neither do I, but I think she might be in a situation. I think so too. She folded the cloth. Set it down. I'm not going to do anything about it yet, she said. Not until I know for sure. And not until I know what the situation actually is. Boone nodded. He drank his coffee. 19 days, he said. 19 days, she agreed. She knew by Thursday. Boone had a friend named Pete Garland. Pete drove a delivery truck that serviced half the commercial businesses in the county. He saw things. He noticed things. He was the kind of man who kept information the way other people keep spare change, not because he was mercenary, not because he planned to use it, just because it accumulated and you never knew. Pete had seen Deborah's car, parked behind the Donato Properties office on Tuesday evening. 8:30 p.m., stayed 40 minutes. Boone told Wren on Thursday morning before she opened. She stood in the kitchen and processed it. She thought about 9 years. 9 years of side-by-side shifts. 9 years of covering for each other, trading sections, splitting the bad tables and the good tips. She thought about the morning after her father's funeral, when Deborah had come in before opening and cleaned the entire kitchen without being asked, without saying a word about it. She thought about all of that. And then she thought about the back window on Hemlock Street. Clean entry. Professional information has a cost. Her father had written somewhere in that notebook. Not about Donato, about business in general. Question is always, who's paying and why? She waited. Thursday afternoon, 2:30, the between time. The diner was quiet. Deborah was rolling silverware at the far end of the counter. Wren walked down and sat on the stool next to her. She put a photograph on the counter between them. Boone had taken it from a distance. Pete's truck parked on the street, Boone in the passenger seat with his phone. The Donato Properties office rear entrance. Car that was unmistakably Deborah's. A silver Civic with the cracked left taillight she'd been meaning to fix for 6 months. Deborah stopped rolling silverware. She looked at the photograph. She looked at Wren. She didn't say, that's not my car, or that could be anyone, or where did you get that? She just stopped. And Wren understood, in that stopping, that she'd been right. Tell me, Wren said. Debra set down the fork and the napkin. She put both hands flat on the counter. She looked at them. "My husband," she said. Keith, a pause. 5 years ago. Before we got the payment plan worked out with the bank, he borrowed money. Not from a bank, Ren waited, from people connected to Donato, a man named Paris. He was friendly about it at the time. They're always friendly at first. They were. Deborah's voice was very level. We paid most of it back, but the interest, the way they calculated it, we kept paying and it kept not going down. And then about 4 months ago, a man came to the house. Not Paris. A different man. What did he want? He wanted to know about you, about the diner, about what you were doing. She finally looked up. He said if I helped them understand what was happening here, the debt would disappear. All of it. And if you didn't? He didn't say specifically. He didn't have to. Ren sat with that. She thought about anger. She examined it the way a doctor examines a symptom, looking for what it was actually telling her. The anger was there, real and sharp. But underneath it was something else, her father again. People are mostly not evil. They're mostly just afraid. The genuinely evil ones are rarer than you think. The afraid ones, they're everywhere. Debra was afraid. She had a husband she loved and a debt she couldn't escape, and someone had found the exact pressure point and pressed it. "How long have you been reporting to them?" Ren asked. 3 months. "About, what have you told them?" "Nothing important. I didn't know anything important. I told them you got the certified letter. I told them you'd called someone. I didn't know who. I just saw you on the phone looking like something was wrong." A pause. "I told them about the office on Hemlock Street." "I know," Ren said. "Sorry," 2 words. "Sorry. I didn't know what else to do. I thought if I just gave them small things, they'd keep it small," Ren said. Debra looked at her. "That's not how it works," Ren said. Not unkindly. "You know that." "I know." Ren looked at the photograph. "Then at Deborah, they bribed you with your own husband's debt," she said. "They created the situation and then offered you relief from it. That's not a choice. That's a trap." Deborah was very still. "You have 2 options," Ren said. "You can keep doing what you're doing. Keep passing them small things and hoping they keep it small. Or," she paused, "you can help me. And in exchange, I will do everything I can to make sure you and Keith come out of this without losing anything more than you've already lost." "How can you promise that?" "I can't promise it completely. But I can tell you that what I'm building, what Boone and I are building, if it works, Donato's leverage over people in this town ends. All of it, including Keith's debt. And if it doesn't work, then we're both in the same position we'd be in anyway." Deborah was quiet for a long time. Then, "What would you need me to do?" "Keep reporting to them," Ren said. "But report what I tell you to report." Deborah looked at her. "You want me to feed them bad information. I want you to feed them information that makes them feel like they're winning," Ren said. "Right up until they're not." Cole Hutchins had sold his lumber yard 14 months ago. He'd run it for 22 years. Started with 1 truck and a lot he'd cleared himself. Built it into the primary supplier for construction projects in 3 counties. Employed 11 people at his peak. He sold it for 60 cents on the dollar. He told people at the time that he was ready to retire. He told himself the same thing. But Ren had watched him in the diner over the past year. He came in twice a week now. He sat at a table by himself, not the counter. The counter was for people who wanted company. And Cole wasn't in the market for company. He ordered the same thing. He ate slowly. He looked out the window. He looked like a man who had been relieved of something he'd spent his whole life building. He looked like her father in those last months. She approached him on a Tuesday. She brought his coffee without being asked. Sat down across from him. He looked at her with the measured expression of a man who'd had enough surprises. "I want to talk to you about why you sold," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "That's not something I know it's not something you've talked about," she said. "I know what they told you and what they had on you, and I'm not here to make you feel worse about it." He looked at her more carefully. "How do you know anything about it?" She took the notebook from her jacket pocket. Not the original, a copy she'd made. She'd flagged the pages relevant to Cole. His name appeared 4 times. She slid it across the table. He picked it up. As he read, something moved across his face. Not surprise, or not only surprise. Something else, the particular expression of a person who has been carrying a private humiliation for a long time and suddenly understands they were not the only one. "This is Tom's handwriting," he said. Yes, he was watching them. For 2 years, Cole set the notebook down carefully. "They told me there was a lien issue on the east parcel," he said. His voice was flat, controlled. "A title dispute going back to the 1990s. They said if it went to court, it could be tied up for years, possibly result in a forced sale at auction." "Was it real?" I had a lawyer look at it. My lawyer said it was ambiguous. Possibly valid. Possibly, Ren said. Possibly. He looked out the window. 60 years old. I'd been fighting for that business my whole working life. The idea of 3 more years of legal uncertainty at 60 years old. He stopped. I took their offer. I told myself I was being practical. You were being human, Ren said. They found the pressure point. They always do. He looked at her. What do you want from me, Ren? I want you to consider being a witness. Not in the street, not publicly, not yet. Just someone who will eventually, if it comes to it, tell a court what happened to you. And if I do that, you're not alone. You're part of a record. And the record is what matters. Your father believed that. He was right. He didn't get to see it work. Cole looked at the notebook again. The lien was manufactured, she said. I've had Nora Bassett look at it. The title dispute was based on a document that doesn't exist in any county record prior to 7 years ago. You can prove that? Nora can. With your testimony about the timeline, it becomes a pattern. 1 incident is a dispute. 3 incidents is a pattern. A pattern is something a federal court pays attention to. Cole was quiet. He drank his coffee. He set the cup down. I'll think about it, he said. That's all I'm asking. She got up. He stopped her with, Ren. She looked back. Father came to me, Cole said, about a year before he died. He asked me if I'd noticed anything unusual in the Donato invoices on the county construction bids. I told him I hadn't paid attention. A pause. I had paid attention. I just wasn't ready to say so. She held that. He would have understood, she said. I know, Cole said. I just wish I'd said it then. She walked back to the counter. She thought, that's the thing about the truth. It doesn't disappear when you don't say it. It just waits. Boone came home at 10:15. She heard the Harley before she saw him. The particular note of it coming down Sycamore. The way she'd learned to recognize it, the way you learn to recognize a person's footsteps. He came in through the back. Set his jacket on the chair. Washed his hands. She had food on the table. She always did when he came in late. He sat down. She watched him eat for a moment. There was something in his posture, not tense exactly, but held. Like a sentence that hadn't been finished yet. Tell me, she said. He looked up. I found Victor Ames, he said. She set her fork down. Boone had been trying to locate Ames for 3 months. The name had appeared in conversations across 3 counties, mentioned sideways, the way people mention something they're not supposed to mention. A man who handles things, a man who appears and disappears, a man connected to Donato properties in no way you could point to on paper. Where? He's in Morristown, running a property management company now. Legitimately, as far as I can tell. Boone paused. I didn't approach him directly. I talked to a man who knows him, who has reason to believe that Ames has been wanting out of whatever arrangement he was in. Wanting out because? Because the arrangement has changed. Because Fitch has gotten more aggressive in the past 2 years. Because Ames did jobs for Ray Donato and those jobs had a certain scope. And then Fitch started directing things separately. Without Ray's knowledge, apparently. Ren was very still. Separately, she said. That's what I was told. Meaning Fitch acts on his own. Meaning Fitch acts on his own when he decides something needs to be handled. And Ray finds out afterward, if at all. She looked at the table. Dad, she said quietly. That's what I think, Boone said. I can't prove it yet. But the timeline fits. Your father was getting close to the point of taking that notebook somewhere official. Fitch would have known that. Fitch has sources in this county we haven't even identified yet, and Fitch decided to handle it. Before Ray could make a different call, she processed that. It was complicated, in a way she hadn't expected. She had built a picture in her mind over 14 months. Ray Donato at the center. Ray Donato as the source of it. The man who had calculated the value of her father's life against the cost of leaving him alive, and made a decision. The picture was shifting. Does that change anything? She asked. It changes who the most dangerous person in the room is, Boone said. Doesn't change what happened to your father. No, she said. It doesn't. She got up, stood at the kitchen window, the backyard in the dark. The pear tree her father had planted along the back fence 20 years ago that still gave fruit every September. Ray Donato has been running an organized financial crime operation in this county for 7 years, she said. He has pressured people into selling their livelihoods. He has corrupted the local law enforcement. He may not have ordered my father's death directly, but he created the entire structure that made it possible. Yes, Boone said. That doesn't make him innocent of anything, no, Boone said. It doesn't. She turned back to the table. Can we get to Ames? My contact thinks so. Not immediately, and not through official channels. Through you, through me, he looked at her. I need a few more days. I need to make sure that approaching him doesn't tip Fitch off. How long? A week. Maybe less. She looked at the calendar on the wall. Thomas Calloway's calendar. He'd bought them every December, the kind with photographs of Tennessee landscapes. This one had been the last he'd bought. She'd kept it up even after the year changed. October was a waterfall somewhere in the Smokies. 12 days left, she said. 12 days, Boone said. It's enough. He said it like he meant it. She chose to believe him. It's the coffee mug that did it. Ray Donato came back on a Monday. This time he came alone, just himself and Fitch. No men in heavy jackets. Donato had recalibrated. He understood now that the men in the jackets had been a mistake. He came in the quiet of late morning, sat at the corner booth, ordered coffee. Wren brought it. She was pleasant, unhurried. She asked if they needed anything else. Fitch watched her with his careful, problem-solving eyes. She could feel him trying to categorize her, trying to find the gap between what she showed and what she was. She gave him nothing. Donato talked about the town, about investment, about vision. He was good at it. She could hear, under the machinery of it, that he actually believed some of what he was saying. He had a particular version of Sadler Creek in his head. She just wasn't in it. She listened. She was polite. She said she was still considering the sugar canister was 3 feet away. When they left, she didn't react. She cleared their table. She wrote nothing down. She did nothing that looked like anything. That evening after closing, she sat in the back office and listened to the recording. Donato's voice, Fitch's voice. 22 minutes of conversation, most of it was mundane. Business talk, references to other properties, comment about a Nashville investor she didn't recognize. But at minute 14, Fitch said something she played back 3 times. The filing holds until the 21st. If she hasn't responded adequately, the court proceeding goes forward automatically. At that point, it's out of our hands, she'll respond, Donato said. She has that Bassett woman helping her. A pause. Bassett is a complication, Fitch said. Bassett is old, Donato said. She's been out of practice for 3 years. She has a file, Fitch said. His voice was careful. I want to address that before the 21st. Address how? A pause. I'll reach out, Fitch said, professionally. She'll understand. Wren sat very still. She played that section again. She has a file. I want to address that. Fitch knew about Nora's file. He knew or suspected that Nora had something from 22 years ago, and he was going to address it. She called Nora immediately. Nora answered on the second ring. I need you to make copies of everything, Wren said. Tonight. Multiple copies. Different locations. Pause. What happened? I have a recording. Fitch knows about your file. He's going to contact you. Contact me how? He said professionally. That could mean anything. Nora was quiet for a moment. I have 3 copies of everything already, she said. I'm a former attorney. I don't keep original documents in one place. He doesn't know that. No, Nora said. He won't expect an old retired woman to have operational security. Despite everything, Wren almost smiled. Friend, Nora said. If he contacts me, I want you to know something. What? I've had difficult opposing counsel my entire career. Men who thought they could intimidate older women out of good sense. Fitch is not the first. He is not even close to the most frightening. Pause. I'll call you when he makes contact. She hung up. Wren sat in the dark office. She thought about the recording. 14 minutes of unremarkable business conversation, and then 8 seconds that changed the shape of everything. Fitch was afraid. That was the truth underneath it. A man who wasn't afraid doesn't talk about addressing an old retired lawyer's file. A man who isn't afraid doesn't act unilaterally, doesn't make moves without his principal knowing. Fitch was protecting something 22 years old, and cornered people, as Nora had said, make different decisions than powerful ones. 2 days later, Nora called. He sent a letter, she said. Her voice was even, on his firm's letterhead, suggesting that my involvement in a current legal matter might bring into question some procedural decisions from earlier in my career. That such scrutiny might be uncomfortable. That's a threat, Wren said. It's a very poorly constructed threat, Nora said. He cited no specifics, which tells me he doesn't know exactly what I have. He knows I have something, but not what. How did you respond? I haven't yet. I'm going to respond with a very polite letter thanking him for his concern and informing him that I have referred the matter to the Tennessee State Bar's Ethics Division for their review. You're reporting him. I am reporting his letter, which is itself a document, which enters the record. A pause. Every move he makes out of fear becomes evidence, Wren. That is how this works. He cannot help himself. Wren held the phone and felt something settle in her chest. Not confidence exactly. Not yet. The thing that comes before confidence. The sense that the ground under your feet is real, Nora, she said. What made you keep that file 22 years ago? What made you hold on to it? A long pause. Your father, Nora said. Wren waited. He came to my office that same year. 1999 or 2000, I believe. He brought me a property transaction to review. Something small unrelated to any of this. We got to talking about what? About what we owed to the places we lived in. About whether it was enough to just do our own work honestly and not look at what was happening around us. Another pause. He said something I never forgot. He said, Nora, indifference is just cowardice with better manners. Wren closed her eyes. I drove home that night and pulled the Donato file out of storage, Nora said. I put it somewhere I would not lose it because of what he said. 9 days in, 12 days had become 9. Boone had made contact with Victor Ames through a two-step introduction that had taken the better part of a week to arrange carefully enough that it wouldn't vibrate back to Fitch. He hadn't met with Ames directly yet, still building the ground, still making sure the approach was solid. Wren trusted him to move at the right speed. She was managing her own front. The diner ran. The coffee was made. The specials went on the board. She smiled at Harold Birch and remembered that he took his eggs over medium and not over easy, which was a distinction that mattered to him and therefore mattered to her. She kept the sugar canister on the counter. She had 3 recordings now. None of them individually were enough. Together they established a pattern. On the 9th day, she drove to Nora's house after closing. Nora lived in a craftsman bungalow on the west side of town, set back from the street with a deep porch and the kind of old-growth oak in the front yard that told you the house had been there long enough to mean something. It was 10 in the evening. Nora had left the porch light on. They sat at the kitchen table. Nora had made tea. A file from 22 years ago was spread out in front of them. Here is where we are, Nora said. She laid it out cleanly, with the directness Wren had always appreciated. The procedural defense was solid. Zoning variance issue was addressable through a standard correction filing, which Nora had already prepared. If submitted by day 14, it would render the Donato Properties claim moot on its face. That stops the clock on the diner, Wren said. It buys time. It does not end the larger situation. What does? Nora looked at the documents on the table. The file from 1999, the copies of Thomas Calloway's notes, the letter from Fitch, now itself submitted to the Bar Ethics Board. We need federal attention, Nora said. State bar complaint puts Fitch's conduct into an official record. The recordings establish a pattern of intimidation. Your father's notes establish the financial fraud. Cole Hutchins' testimony establishes a pattern of coercion, but we need a federal agency to want to look. We need someone to hand them a package they cannot reasonably ignore. And Ames, Wren said, if Boone can get a statement from Ames about Fitch's independent actions. Nora paused. That becomes the linchpin. Without Ames, financial fraud and coercion and a questionable death. Serious. Difficult to prove individually. With Ames, we have a direct connection between an independent actor and a specific act. Your father's death becomes not a medical ambiguity, but an event with a chain of command. Wren looked at the table. How confident are you in Boone? Nora asked. Completely, Wren said. Then we planned for Ames. They worked for 2 hours. By the time Wren left, past midnight. The street was empty. The town was quiet in the way small towns get at midnight in September. A deep, undramatic quiet. The quiet of a place that is genuinely resting. She sat in her car for a moment before starting it. She thought about her father. She thought about the last time she'd sat with him in the diner, just the two of them, after closing. He'd been tired. She could see it now in memory, the tiredness that she'd attributed to age and long days, and not to what was actually happening inside him. He'd looked around the diner the way he sometimes did. You know what I like best about this place? He'd said. She'd said, the pie. He'd laughed. Besides the pie, tell me, people are honest in here, he'd said. I don't mean I know people lie. I know people have bad days. But in here, when they sit down, something happens. They say please and thank you. They ask about each other. They're a little bit better than they are on the street sometimes, she'd said. Because they're comfortable, because someone's taking care of them, he'd said. That's what a diner does. It tells people, you matter enough for someone to bring you what you need. He'd looked at her. That's what you do, Wren. Every day. Don't ever think it's small. She sat in the car on Nora's quiet street and let herself feel the full weight of missing him, not the managed version. Not the version she carried through the workdays. The real one. She let it sit for a moment. Then she started the car. She had 8 days. The recording was in 3 places. The notebook copies were in 3 places. The letter to the Bar Ethics Board had been filed. Cole Hutchins was thinking. Boone was closing in on Ames, and at the counter of Calloway's diner, in a ceramic sugar canister, the truth was accumulating. Write it down, Wren. If it matters, write it down. She drove home through the dark Tennessee streets. Tomorrow the diner would open at 7. She would make the coffee and write the specials and bring Harold Birch his eggs and mean it when she asked about his wife's garden. And when Ray Donato came back, because he was coming back, 8 days was not very long. She would smile and pour the coffee and let him sit at that corner table and believe that he was winning. He wasn't, but he didn't know that yet. That was the thing about a long game. You had to be willing to let the other person think they were winning. Right up until they weren't. Victor Ames was not what she'd expected. Boone had described him carefully on the phone the night before. 51 years old, medium height, medium build. The kind of man you forget 10 minutes after meeting him. That was, Boone said, almost certainly intentional. She met them at a motel off Route 11W in Morristown, 40 minutes from Sadler Creek, far enough. Boone had chosen the location, a clean, plain room, 2 chairs and a small table by the window. The curtains were drawn. Outside, the parking lot was half empty. Tuesday afternoon, going nowhere in particular, Ames was already there when she arrived. He was sitting with both hands on the table, loose, visible. The posture of a man who understood that the person coming in needed to see he wasn't a threat before anything else could happen. She sat down. Boone stood by the window. Ames looked at her directly. His eyes were unremarkable in color, a gray-brown, the color of old concrete. But there was something in them that she recognized from medical school, the look of a person who had seen consequences, who had stopped being surprised by where choices led. "Mrs. Calloway," he said, "Mr. Ames, your husband tells me you want to understand what happened to your father." "I want the truth about it," she said. "All of it." He looked at the table. Then back at her. "I didn't know your father," he said. "I want to be clear about that. I didn't have any contact with him directly. I want you to understand the shape of what I did and didn't do." "Tell me the shape," she said. He told her. He had worked for Ray Donato's operation for 11 years. Not as an employee, never anything on paper. He did specific jobs when specific jobs needed doing. Background research, property investigations. Occasionally, he said this without looking away, more direct interventions when someone was causing problems and the problems needed to stop. What kind of interventions? Pressure, evidence of vulnerability. Occasionally making it clear that a person's situation could become more complicated than it was. Threats, the kind that don't leave marks. She held his gaze. "And my father?" He was quiet for a moment. "Your father wasn't my job," he said. "I want to be precise about that because it matters for what comes after. When the situation with your father developed, when Donato's people became aware that he was compiling information, I was consulted. About possible approaches, consulted by Ray Donato. Initially, yes, and? Donato wanted the information retrieved. He wanted your father, discouraged. His preference was something that didn't escalate. He knew your father. Not well, but enough. He didn't want. Stopped. Chose his words carefully. Yet a version of this he was willing to do, and a version he wasn't. The version he wasn't willing to do was permanent. The words settled in the room. "But someone did the permanent version," Wren said. "Yes, Fitch." Ames looked at her. Something shifted slightly in his expression. Not surprise. More like the recognition of someone arriving at the correct answer. "Fitch came to me separately," he said. "About 2 months before your father died. He said the situation had changed. Said Donato's approach was insufficient. He said your father had made contact with someone in the FBI's Nashville office, which meant the timeline had compressed. He was going to report. He had already made initial contact. Fitch knew this. Donato did not know this yet. How did Fitch know? He has a source in the Nashville Federal Building. Has for years. Someone in administrative staff who flags names and case intake forms. She absorbed that. Fitch acted before Ray knew, she said. Fitch acted before Ray could make a different decision, Ames said. Because Fitch understood that Ray, faced with that specific situation, might have chosen to find another way. And Fitch could not allow that conversation to happen, because Fitch needed it to stop completely, because Fitch has been in this for 22 years and he has more to lose than anyone. Donato could theoretically withstand exposure to some of the financial fraud. He has resources. He has lawyers. He has survived difficult situations before. Ames paused. Fitch cannot survive what's in Nora Bassett's file. What he did in 1999 ends his career and his freedom. He has always known that. The moment your father's information reached a federal intake desk, Fitch's window closed, so he used you. He used a man I'd referred to him previously for a specific technical job, a man named Carver. I did not know Carver would be used for this. I found out afterward. And Carver administered a compound. Gradually, father's kidneys. The progression was designed to look natural. She sat very still. She had known this. She had calculated the toxicology herself, alone in her kitchen 14 months ago. She had known, at a cellular level of certainty, what had happened. Hearing it said plainly, in a motel room in Morristown, Tennessee, with the curtains drawn and her husband standing by the window, it was different. It was heavier. "Why are you telling me this?" she said. "Because Fitch is escalating," Ames said. "The letter he sent to your lawyer, that's not the behavior of a man who's confident. That's the behavior of a man who's running out of controlled options. And when men like Fitch run out of controlled options, they make worse decisions. Yes, you're afraid of what he'll do next." Ames looked at her steadily. "I've been in this world for a long time, Mrs. Calloway. I've seen what happens when people like Fitch stop calculating and start reacting. It doesn't go well for anyone in the vicinity, including you, including me." She looked at Boone. He was watching her, his steady, careful face. She looked back at Ames. "Would you make a formal statement," she said, "to a federal prosecutor?" On the record, Ames was quiet for a long moment outside. A car pulled into the parking lot. They all heard it. Nobody moved. The car parked. A door opened and closed, footsteps going away from them. "I spent 11 years being careful not to be in the position you're asking me to put myself in," Ames said. "I know. The risk to me is significant. I know that too. What I did, what I was part of. I'm not asking you to treat that as nothing." "I'm not treating it as nothing," Wren said. "But I'm asking you whether you want the last thing you're connected to in this world to be what happened to my father, or whether you want it to be something else." He looked at the table. She waited. "My mother was a waitress," he said finally. "Quiet, 40 years, a diner like yours. In Knoxville, she didn't say anything. She used to say the same thing every day when she came home. I saw 100 people today, and I made every one of them feel like they mattered." He paused. "I used to think that was a small thing." "It's not a small thing," Wren said. "No," said, "it's not." He looked up. "I'll make the statement," he said. "I'll need certain assurances from the prosecutor, formal ones. But yes." She drove back to Sadler Creek alone. Boone had stayed in Morristown. He needed to arrange the secure channel for Ames's written statement before end of day. She'd taken his car. The Harley was too recognizable now. She was 20 minutes out when her phone rang, unknown number. She answered. Silence for 2 seconds. Then a voice she didn't recognize, male, flat, professional. "Mrs. Calloway, we know about the motel." She kept driving. Kept her speed exactly the same. "I don't know what you're referring to," she said. "We know who you met with. We know what he told you. And I want you to understand, whatever he said, he cannot protect himself, and he cannot protect you. You have the wrong number," she said. She hung up. She drove 3 more miles. Then she pulled off the road at a gas station. She sat in the car for a moment. They knew about Ames and everything. If they knew everything, the call would have been different, harder. This was a phishing call, designed to make her panic, designed to make her call Ames, call Boone, call Nora, and give them a trail to follow in the next 24 hours. She didn't call anyone. She sat with it. They know about the motel. They know who you met with, Fitch, not Ray. This was Fitch's move, too fast, too aggressive, too willing to tip his hand. Ray Donato would never have made a call like that. Ray Donato would have waited and watched. Fitch was reacting. Which meant Fitch was scared. Which meant the meeting with Ames had landed exactly where it needed to. She started the car. She drove home the long way. Not Boone's mountain roads, but the county route. The one that passed 3 different security cameras at county intersections that she knew about because her father had once served on the county infrastructure committee and had explained the camera placement to her, matter-of-factly, over dinner. Someone was following her. They'd be on camera doing it. She got home at 6:15. She didn't call Boone until 9, when she was sure the delay itself wasn't being monitored for a pattern. "Someone called me," she said. On the road back, Boone was quiet. "Fitch, his people. They know about the motel. Not about Ames specifically, I don't think. But they know a meeting happened. How? I don't know yet. But it doesn't change anything, Wren. Boone, it doesn't change anything. The statement is already drafted. Package goes to Knoxville tomorrow. They can know about the meeting all they want. There's nothing left to intercept." A long pause. "You're sure?" "I'm sure," she said. She was mostly sure. That was enough. Boone called her at 3 in the afternoon. She was in the middle of the lunch crowd. She stepped into the back. "W," he said. "Someone's been behind me since Morristown." She kept her voice even. "How long?" "Since I left the motel. 2 vehicles, alternating. Careful. But I've been doing this long enough to know when someone's rotating surveillance. Fitch's people. That's my read, Boone. I'm not worried about me, he said. I need you to call Nora. Copies of everything. She needs to move them to a second location today. Not tomorrow. Today, already done. She moved them 3 days ago. A pause. Of course she did, he said. What are you going to do? I'm going to take the long way home, he said. Very long way. I know these roads better than anyone they'd put on me. She knew that was true. 20 years of riding through these mountains. Every back road, every hollow, every stretch of switchback that only made sense if you'd grown up knowing it. Be careful, she said. Always. Boone, yeah. Come home. Yes, ma'am, he said. She got through the rest of the lunch rush. She smiled at people. She refilled coffee. She told Harold Birch that the apple pie was particularly good today, and she meant it because it actually was. 3:45, she heard the Harley in the parking lot. She didn't go to the window. She waited. Boone came in through the front door. He sat at stool 7. She put coffee in front of him. He looked completely calm. She had learned to read the difference between his calm and his real calm. This was real calm. 2 vehicles, he said quietly. I lost them on Clinch Mountain. There's a logging road at mile marker 14 that they'd never have found on a map. Did they get close to the motel? No. I made sure of that first. I drove 40 minutes in the wrong direction before I even went to meet you. She exhaled slowly. They know we met with someone, she said. They don't know who. And they don't know what was said. Fitch is moving faster. 5 days left, Boone said. He's running out of time to influence things through normal channels. Normal channels meaning the channels he usually uses. Pruitt, the court clerk. The zoning board. Nora files the correction on the variance tomorrow, Wren said. That stops the clock on the immediate case, which removes his leverage on the diner, which means he has no legitimate tools. Boone looked at her. When a man runs out of legitimate tools, she said, we need to move the timeline up. Get the package to the FBI field office before the filing deadline. Not after, before. So they have time to put resources in place. Nora was going to wait until after the filing. I know what Nora was planning. Think the situation has changed, she thought about it. Looked at the sugar canister on the counter. 3 recordings now. The last one had Ray Donato and Fitch discussing the Bassett file directly. It wasn't a confession, but in context with everything else, it was a significant thread. Tonight, she said. Tonight, Boone agreed. They laid it all out on Nora's kitchen table. Every document. Thomas Calloway's notebook copies organized by category. Financial fraud documentation, shell company registrations. Invoice discrepancy cross-referenced with county permits. The recordings from the sugar canister. 3 conversations. 19 minutes of usable material. Fitch's voice, Donato's voice. Specific statements about specific actions, Nora's file from 1999. Fitch's signature on the irregular document. The bar ethics complaint now officially filed and acknowledged. Cole Hutchins' preliminary statement, not yet sworn but documented. 2 other business owners Wren had spoken to quietly over the past week, both of whom had agreed to speak formally if it came to it. And Victor Ames Boone had his preliminary statement already drafted. Ames had written it himself carefully and sent it through a secure channel. It was thorough. It was specific. It named Fitch directly. It named Carver. It described the mechanism. Nora read everything twice without speaking. When she finished, she folded her hands on the table. This is enough, she said. Enough for what specifically? Wren asked. Enough for a federal agent with judgment to look at and decide this warrants immediate investigation. It is not enough for a conviction today, but it is absolutely enough for an investigation. And an investigation is what changes everything. Because once they start looking, Fitch cannot function. He operates entirely on the assumption that no one is looking carefully. The moment federal eyes are on this county, every tool he has becomes a liability. Who do we send it to? Boone asked. Nora looked at him. I have a contact at the FBI's Knoxville field office, not Nashville, Knoxville. A woman I worked with on a fraud case 15 years ago. She is thorough. She's not connected to anything in this county. You trust her? I trust her professional judgment, Nora said, which is the right kind of trust for this situation. When can you reach her? Tonight, Nora looked at the table. I'll call her tonight and arrange a meeting. Tomorrow, if possible, 4 days before the filing deadline, Wren said. Yes, Nora said. Which means if she moves quickly, there can be federal presence before the court proceeding, which changes the nature of the court proceeding entirely. They looked at the documents on the table, all of it. Everything Thomas Calloway had started. Everything Wren had carried forward. Everything Boone had gathered in 8 months of quiet rides and careful conversations. Nora reached out and touched the edge of Thomas's notebook. Your father wrote this down, she said. He wrote it down because he believed it mattered. He was right. Ren looked at her father's handwriting, the careful columns of numbers, the dates and names and amounts, the handwriting of a man who had spent his whole life believing that accuracy was a form of integrity. He was right, she said. Ray Donato came in for the last time on a Thursday. It was mid-morning. The breakfast crowd had thinned. Deborah was in the back. 3 customers at corner tables, not paying attention to anything but their plates. Donato came alone. That was new. And she understood why. Nora had called her the night before. The Knoxville office has made quiet contact with Donato's personal attorney, not Fitch's firm, his private counsel in Nashville. They extended what they called a professional courtesy, a notification that certain matters were under review. They warned him, Ren said. They gave him an opportunity to make decisions before this situation was no longer his to decide. A pause. He has 24 hours, roughly. So when Ray Donato walked through her door the next morning, alone, in the same gray suit, without the armor of Fitch or a legal team, she knew what it meant. He was not coming to threaten her. He was coming because it was the last morning he could choose to. No Fitch, no legal team. Just Ray Donato in his gray suit, silver-haired, 66 years old, sitting down at the corner booth like he owned it. She brought him coffee. She sat down across from him. He looked at her. Something in his expression was different from the previous visits. Less performance. Less of the smooth, calibrated confidence that he wore like a second suit. He looked, she thought, tired. I think we should talk plainly, he said. All right, she said. I know you've been building something, he said. I'm not going to pretend I don't know that. Someone's in my position pays attention. She said nothing. I've been in this county for 7 years, he said. I've done things that were not always straight. I know that. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm something I'm not, she waited. But your father... He stopped. He looked out the window. A long moment. Your father was not something I wanted. I want you to understand that. What you wanted doesn't change what happened. She said no, he said. It doesn't. He turned back to her. Direct. Fitch has been operating outside my direction for longer than you probably know. Certain decisions were made without my knowledge. Afterward, I was informed. I did not make those decisions. But you knew afterward. Yes. And you stayed. He held her gaze. Yes, she let that sit between them. You're telling me this because you know what's coming, she said. I'm telling you because your father deserves to have someone say plainly what happened to him. Even if it's me saying it, doesn't help him. No, he said. It doesn't. She looked at this man, 66 years old. He had built something over 25 years. Not just a criminal enterprise, but an entire constructed life. The suits, the office, vision of himself as a businessman who made towns better. She could see underneath the tiredness that he had almost believed it himself. Almost. The diner, he said. I won't continue the action. The legal filing will be withdrawn. That decision was already made for you, Ren said. Nora filed the correction on the variance 2 days ago. There's no case anymore. Something moved across his face. Then I'm not offering you anything. No, she said. Why, I said. You're not. He looked at the table. She thought about what Nora had said. About Fitch and Donato. The nature of their arrangement. 2 men who had started something together and then found themselves trapped in different versions of it. She thought about her father's notebook, about what he had written and what it had cost him. She thought about the recording device in the canister 3 feet away. This conversation was being captured. Mr. Donato, she said. He looked at her. Think you're tough? She said. The words from his man Marco, 3 weeks ago, the words she'd been carrying since. Prove it. He looked at her for a long moment. That's not what tough looks like at my age, he said quietly. No, she said. It's not. He stood up. Left exact change for the coffee the way he always did. At the door he paused. He didn't turn around. He walked out. She sat at the table. She didn't move for a moment. Then she got up. She went behind the counter. She picked up the sugar canister. She walked to the back office and she sat down and she listened. His voice, clear and quiet. Your father was not something I wanted. Certain decisions were made without my knowledge. I did not make those decisions. She played it again, not a confession to everything. But a door opened wide enough. She called Nora. He just came in, she said. I know, Nora said. My contact at the Knoxville office called an hour ago. They've been watching him since yesterday morning. Ren sat with that. It's already moving, she said. It's been moving since I sent the package, Nora said. They move faster than people expect when the documentation is clean. How long? The filing deadline is Saturday. I believe you'll have your answer before then. The courtroom in Sadler Creek was not large. It was a working room. Dark wood, worn floors, a ceiling that had been painted over so many times it had lost its original texture. Judge Patricia Crane presided, 58 years old, gray hair pulled back, the kind of face that had learned to be unreadable because readable faces got argued with. The public gallery was fuller than anyone had expected. Word travels in small towns, not always accurately, but this time it had traveled accurately enough. The Callaway hearing, the diner on Main Street. The case that had been eating at people quietly for weeks because they all knew what it was really about, even if they didn't say it out loud. Harold Birch was in the third row. Cole Hutchins was in the back. Two other men Wren recognized as former business owners. People who had sold things they hadn't wanted to sell. People who had told themselves it was just business. Debra sat in the gallery, not at the staff table. Wren had told her she didn't need to be behind the counter today. Boone was in the front row. He'd worn a collared shirt, which Wren had noted without comment. She sat at the respondents' table with Nora. Donato Properties' side of the table had 3 attorneys. Fitch was not among them. That was the first thing she noticed. Nora had noticed it too. She leaned slightly. "He's not here, I see that. That is either very good or very bad. I think we'll find out which." Judge Crane called the session to order. Donato Properties' attorneys rose. The lead counsel, a man named Waverly 50 Nashville firm Expensive Shoes, presented their position. The technical filing, the compliance requirement. He was smooth. He was thorough. He was, Wren noticed, also watching the door. They all were. Nora rose when it was her turn. She was 67 years old. She had been retired for 3 years. She stood at the respondents' table with the complete stillness of someone who had been in this exact position many times and had learned to be more patient than anyone else in the room. "Your Honor," she said, "I'd like to draw the court's attention to the correction filing submitted on Thursday. The variance in question was misclassified in 2004 due to a clerical error. The correction resolves the compliance issue under Tennessee Code, annotated 42-11. The matter is procedurally resolved." Waverly objected. Nora had expected it. She had the statute. She had the correction documentation. She had the county clerk's acknowledgement. The exchange was technical and thorough and took 20 minutes. Then the door to the courtroom opened. 2 people walked in. A man and a woman, both in dark suits, both with the particular quality of stillness that comes from institutional authority. The woman carried a document case. The man held the door for her. Judge Crane looked at them. "Can I help you?" The woman approached the bench. She presented credentials. "Special Agent Diane Mercer, FBI Knoxville Field Office. Your Honor, I'm here to inform the court that this matter has been designated as related to an ongoing federal investigation. We are requesting a stay of proceedings pending the resolution of that investigation." The room changed, not dramatically. Not the way it happens in movies, where people gasp and stand up and everything is obvious. It was quieter than that. It was the quality of air in the room shifting. Waverly was on his feet immediately. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular, Mr. Waverly," Judge Crane said. One look. He sat down. She examined Agent Mercer's documentation. She read it carefully. "Motion for stay is granted pending review," she said. "All proceedings in this matter are suspended. Counsel are directed to submit availability for a status conference within 10 days. She brought down the gavel. It was not dramatic. It was just a woman with a gavel and a decision, and 20 years of sitting in this room knowing the difference between a legitimate case and an engineered one. Court is recessed. Outside on the courthouse steps, the morning was clear. September had brought the first suggestion of fall to the air. Not cold, not yet, but something in it that said the heat was thinking about leaving. Boone stood beside her. He didn't say anything. She looked out at Main Street. From the courthouse steps, you could see the corner of Main and Birch. You could see the sign, Callaway's Diner, Est 89. She'd had it repainted 6 months after her father died. Same font, same green. "Exactly the same, Nora," Wren said. Nora was standing to her right. "Your contact came through. She's good at her job," Nora said simply. "What happens now?" "Now the federal investigation runs its course. Ames has his arrangement. Carver will be found. He's already been located, according to what Mercer told me this morning. Fitch," she paused. "Fitch was taken in for questioning at 6 this morning." "Before the hearing, and Pruitt?" Wren asked. Nora paused. "Mercer's team went to the sheriff's department this morning as well. I understand he was cooperative immediately. Completely, apparently, he didn't fight it." "No." Mercer said he seemed relieved was the word she used. Nora looked at her. Sometimes people get into things so gradually they don't notice the door closing behind them, and they've been waiting a long time for someone to open it from the other side. Wren thought about Pruitt, the coffee cups, the Donato Plaza Cafe logo on his desk every morning. A man who had been her father's friend, who had watched her father's death be closed as an accident and said nothing. She didn't forgive him. Not today. But she understood the door. That's why he wasn't here. Yes, and Donato? He retained separate counsel yesterday. Privately. Not Fitch's firm. Nora looked at her. A man who retains separate counsel before the investigation officially begins is a man who is cooperating. Or intending to. She thought about Thursday morning. The way he'd looked at her. Not through her. The way he'd done every time before. At her. The tiredness in his face that wasn't performance. The specific weight of a man who had spent 25 years building something and had only just fully understood what it had cost. She looked at the corner of Main and Birch. Boone, she said. Yeah, let's go open the diner. He looked at her. It's Saturday, she said. We close at 2 on Saturdays. We've got 4 hours. He almost smiled. Yeah, he said. Okay. Harold Birch came in at 11. He sat at his usual table, ordered his usual thing, and looked at Wren with the expression of a man who had watched this town for a long time and understood what he'd seen this morning, even if he couldn't have explained the legal particulars. Father would have been proud, he said. She poured his coffee. He would have said someone needed to be responsible for keeping the records straight, she said. He would have, Harold agreed. And then he would have asked if you wanted pie. She laughed. A real one. Kind that caught her off guard. Do you want pie, Harold? I always want pie. Cole Hutchins came in at noon. He sat at the counter. Not a table, the counter, which meant he wanted to talk. She made time between tables. I'll make a formal statement, he said. Whatever they need. Whenever they need it. Thank you, Cole. Your dad came to me, he said. I told you that. I've been thinking about it since. He came to me because he thought I'd already noticed. He wasn't asking me to take a risk. He was asking me to confirm something I'd already seen, and you had and I had. He wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. I let him down. I let him walk out of here alone with what he knew. You were protecting yourself, Wren said. That's human, it is, he said. Doesn't make it right. No, she said. But it makes it understandable, and it means you know exactly why you're making the statement now. He nodded. Drank his coffee. Not for me, he said. For him, she said. For him, Cole agreed. At 1:30, Deborah found her in the kitchen. They stood by the prep station. The lunch crowd was winding down. Through the pass-through window, Wren could see Boone at stool 7, talking to Harold, gesturing about something. I don't know what happens to Keith's debt, Deborah said. Nora is working on it, Wren said. The debt was structured as part of a pattern of coercion. There are legal arguments for voiding it. That might not work, it might not. But it's the first time anyone's tried it. Deborah looked at her. Why are you helping us? After what I did, Wren thought about how to answer that. She thought about her father. About what he'd said to Nora 15 years ago, sitting in her office. Indifference is just cowardice with better manners. She thought about Victor Ames in the motel room, his mother, 40 years behind a diner counter in Knoxville, coming home every day saying I made every one of them feel like they mattered. She thought about what a diner actually was. What her father had understood and she had slowly understood after him. Father built this place to be somewhere people felt taken care of, she said. He didn't put conditions on that. He didn't only take care of the easy ones. Deborah was quiet. You were in a trap, Wren said. They put you in it deliberately. Being angry at you for that would be like being angry at the person they used the trap on. You're allowed to be angry, Deborah said. I am, Wren said. I was. But anger doesn't help Keith's debt get resolved. Work does. They stood there for a moment. Go check on table 6, Wren said. They look like they want the check. Deborah almost smiled. Yeah. Okay, at 2 o'clock she locked the front door, the closed sign in the window. The last customers had gone. The chairs were up on the tables. The counter was clean. Boone was doing the last of the mopping. He moved through the room with the same steady competence he did everything. She watched him for a moment from the kitchen doorway. 6 years, she thought about the first Tuesday he'd come in. Stool 7. Black coffee, biscuits and gravy. The good tip. The fact that he came back. Her father had said I liked that one, and he had been right the way he was right about most things that actually mattered. She walked to the back office. She sat down at her father's desk. She opened the bottom drawer and took out the green composition notebook, the original. She kept it there now. Not locked away, not hidden. Just there, in the drawer of his desk, where he had worked and thought and paid attention for 35 years. She opened it to the last page, his handwriting, the warning, the love, the instruction. If I can't get this to someone who can use it. Ren, be careful. Dee knows I know. I love you more than this diner and more than any of this, but someone needs to know. She sat with it. She thought about the courtroom this morning. The way the room had changed when Mercer walked in. The gavel coming down. Crane's face giving nothing away and meaning everything. She thought about Fitch, taken in at 6 in the morning before he could sit in that courtroom and watch it fall apart. She thought about the particular justice of that. That a man who had spent 22 years keeping himself out of rooms where consequences happened had finally run out of exits. She thought about Ray Donato sitting at her corner table on Thursday morning. The tiredness. Your father was not something I wanted. The complexity of that, the way it didn't excuse anything and didn't simplify anything and still mattered somehow. She thought about Victor Ames and his mother behind a counter in Knoxville for 40 years. She thought about Cole Hutchins sitting at the counter today instead of a table. She thought about Harold Birch asking for pie. She closed the notebook gently. She looked at her father's reading glasses on the desk. She had never moved them. She didn't know if she ever would. You were right, Dad, she thought. Someone needed to know. You made sure I knew, and I did what you taught me to do. I wrote it down. I paid attention. I kept the door open. I took care of people. Even the complicated ones, even the ones who made it hard, even when it cost something. She sat quietly in his office for a few more minutes, then she got up. She walked out to the dining room. Boone was done with the mopping. He was at the counter, his back to her, making a fresh pot of coffee even though they were closed. Because that was Boone, he made things ready for the next time. She sat at stool 7. He set a cup in front of her without turning around. Like he'd heard her come in. Like he'd been listening for her the way she'd learned to listen for the sound of his Harley on Sycamore. She wrapped her hands around the cup. The diner was quiet. September light came through the front windows at the particular afternoon angle that made the floor look like old honey. It's not over, she said. No, he said. Federal investigations take time. Months. Maybe. Nora says possibly longer. Ames will have to testify. He said he would. Fitch will fight everything. They all do, Boone said. Until they don't. She drank her coffee. My dad thought this place was important, she said. Not because of what it was worth. Because of what it did. It took care of people, Boone said. It took care of people, she agreed. He turned around, leaned against the counter, looked at her. You did the same thing, he said. For weeks, in the middle of all of it. You ran the diner. You remembered Harold's eggs. You meant it when you asked about people's days. You didn't let any of it make you hard. It wanted to, she said. I know. I watched it want to, but he raised me right, she said. Boone smiled. It changed his face. It always changed his face. That smile took the steadiness she had married and the humor she had not expected and made him entirely, specifically himself. He did, Boone said. She looked at the room around her, the 11 stools. Her father's number, and she had never asked why. Floor he'd laid himself. The counter he'd poured. The walls the color of old honey. The photograph above the register. Thomas Calloway at 31, white apron, big hands, the smile that didn't know it was being photographed, the menu board in her handwriting now. Same font. Same green, exactly the same. We open Monday, she said. 7 o'clock. Boone said Harold will be here at 7:15. He's always here at 7:15. Over medium, not over easy, I know, Boone said. You've told me it matters to him. I know it does. She set her cup down. Main and Birch, the street outside, quiet in the early Saturday afternoon. A car going past. A woman walking a dog, the ordinary, unremarkable life of a town that was still here. Still itself. Still the place people came back to because they meant to. Boone, she said. Yeah, thank you. For the 8 months, he was quiet for a moment. Your father was a good man, he said. And he trusted me with you. I didn't take that lightly. She looked at him, I know. She said the afternoon light moved slowly across the floor. Outside Sadler Creek went about it Saturday. Inside Calloway's diner, a woman and her husband drank coffee in the quiet and let the day settle into what it was, not an ending, not quite that. A turning. The kind of turning that happens when something that has been wrong for a long time finally, carefully begins to be made right. Not all the way right. Not immediately. Not without cost. But right enough to keep going. Right enough to open the door Monday morning. Right enough to make the coffee and write the specials and mean it when you ask someone how their day is going. That was what her father had built. That was what she was keeping. Calloway's Diner. Est. 1989, built by hand. Kept by heart.